The morning air in Aspen Hollow had a bite to it, cold enough to sting the skin, silent enough to make a child uneasy. Frost clung to the edges of the pine needles, and the clouds hung heavy like they were waiting for something to break. A sleek black SUV rumbled down a narrow gravel road that veered far from the town's well-worn paths, tires crunching over frozen dirt. In the back seat, 6-year-old Harper Whitlock stared out the window, her small fingers wrapped tightly around a faded stuffed fox. She wore a wool sweater too big for her frame, and a quiet expression that didn't match her age. Her legs, bundled in a fleece blanket, lay motionless across the seat. Up front, Graham Whitlock tapped the steering wheel rhythmically, the tension in his jaw pulsing. His designer coat looked out of place against the wilderness creeping in around them. Every few miles he checked the rearview mirror, not for traffic, but for conviction. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Harper asked, her voice barely louder than the hum of the heater. "A picnic," he said with forced cheer. "Just the two of us. Special day." Harper blinked, then looked down at her lap. She didn't mention how strange it was that her tablet was gone, or how her dad had taken her phone for safekeeping and deleted all her messages. She just hugged the fox tighter. The car turned off onto an overgrown trail, winding toward a forgotten dock along the Elk River. The water there was swollen from snowmelt, its current swift and dark. No boats, no houses, no voices. As they parked, Graham stepped out quickly, the door slamming behind him with a snap. He circled to the trunk and yanked out Harper's wheelchair, the metal frame clanking as it hit the gravel. His hand shook slightly as he unfolded it. "Here we go, sweetheart," he said, too softly, too flat. "Let's make some memories." He carried Harper from the car and settled her gently into the chair. His breath fogged in front of him as he wheeled her toward the dock. Every creak of the wooden planks beneath them made Harper wince. On the edge of the tree line, a figure watched. Juniper, her coat chestnut bright against the frost-bitten brush, stood perfectly still, ears pricked forward. Her amber eyes tracked the man and the girl like she already knew something was terribly wrong. Harper looked over her shoulder at the trees. "That horse is watching us." Graham didn't answer. He reached the edge of the dock where a small rowboat rocked against its rope. Without a word, he lifted Harper from the chair and placed her in the boat. Her breathing grew shallow. "I don't want to go, Daddy. It's cold. I don't like the water." He hesitated, looking back toward the road. Then he untied the boat and shoved off. Juniper stepped forward from the woods, hooves crunching leaves, head tossing. She let out a sharp, echoing whinny that cut through the stillness like a warning bell. Halfway to the river's center, Graham stopped rowing. The current rocked them gently. Harper looked up at him, her voice no louder than a breath. "Are we going to eat lunch now?" Graham stood. His expression was empty, eyes dark and hollow, lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't speak. Then, in one motion, he reached down and shoved Harper into the icy black water. The splash was the only sound. Harper didn't scream. The cold hit like a wall. Her body sank quickly, the weight of her clothes dragging her down. She flailed weakly, eyes wide, chest burning. Above, Graham sat in the rocking boat, staring down at the ripples. Then, slowly, he turned the boat and began rowing back toward the dock. But he wasn't alone on the river anymore. From the shore, Juniper bolted into action. She charged down the hill, hooves pounding against frozen earth. Without hesitation, she plunged into the water, muscles working furiously against the current. Harper's small hand reached toward the light breaking through the surface, vision fading. Then, fur. Thick, coarse, and warm. Her fingers latched onto Juniper's dripping mane. The horse surged forward, pulling Harper with her, refusing to let the water take her. On the far side of the river, an old man heard the commotion. Silas McCrae had been tending to a woodpile near his cabin when Juniper's cry echoed through the trees. He moved fast for someone pushing 70, heart pounding, boots soaking as he sprinted toward the shore. He arrived just as Juniper dragged Harper onto the gravel bank. The child collapsed in a coughing fit, her lips blue, her chest heaving. "Easy now," Silas murmured, dropping to his knees beside her. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, found a pulse. Weak, but there. "You're all right. You're all right, kiddo." Juniper stood nearby, soaked and trembling, but alert, never taking her eyes off the girl. Silas wrapped Harper in his flannel jacket, pulling her close to his chest as she shivered violently. "Let's get you warm, sweetheart." Back across the river, Graham watched in shock as the horse vanished into the trees, and the old man carried Harper up a hillside trail. Panic flickered in his eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Back at the cabin, Silas built a fire with shaking hands and laid Harper down on the couch. Juniper stood at the front door like a soldier guarding a queen. Later that evening, when Harper had drifted into an exhausted sleep, Silas walked outside to fetch more firewood. He paused at the edge of the riverbank and looked down. There, embedded in the muddy earth, was a fresh set of hoof prints, deep and steady. Silas knelt beside them, running a calloused hand over the indentations. He exhaled slowly, then looked toward the forest where Juniper had disappeared. "Yeah," he said under his breath. This wasn't an accident. Harper hadn't spoken in 2 days. Not a whisper, not even a sound. She simply stared through the old cabin's window, her small hand resting on Juniper's mane as the chestnut mare stood unmoving beside her. Snowmelt trickled from the trees, birds chirped softly in the distance, but Harper seemed untouched by it all, like she'd slipped beneath the surface of her own silence and chosen not to come up for air. Silas McCrae watched her from the kitchen doorway, coffee cooling in his hand. The girl hadn't asked where she was or who he was. She hadn't cried. That was the part that unsettled him most. May Ellis arrived just before noon, her battered Jeep grumbling up the narrow trail, tires crunching over frost and mud. She stepped out with her signature army green parka and a scowl that said she didn't trust the world, not after what she'd seen of it. Silas met her at the porch. "She's inside." May raised an eyebrow. "And the horse?" "Hasn't left her side." May didn't ask more. She'd been a trauma nurse in the Army for 15 years. She'd seen enough broken children to know what it looked like when one barely survived. Inside, May knelt beside the couch. Harper looked at her with tired eyes but didn't pull away. "I'm May," she said gently. "I brought you some new pajamas. You like blue?" No answer. Juniper let out a low snort, brushing Harper's shoulder with her nose. The girl blinked slowly and reached up to rest her fingers in the horse's tangled forelock. May nodded toward Silas, then turned toward the kitchen. "We need to talk." They stood at the sink while the kettle hissed on the stove. "She's not just scared," May said in a low voice. "She's trained not to speak." Silas frowned. "You think someone's been hurting her?" "I know the signs, Si." She pulled back the sleeve of her coat to reveal faint bruises on Harper's wrist. "Old ones, and more I haven't seen yet." Silas's jaw clenched. That man, Graham Whitlock, he didn't just dump her in that river out of desperation. He's been breaking her for a while, and now he wants her back. May pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. He went on Channel 7 last night, told the world his daughter was kidnapped, called you a mountain-dwelling recluse with a history of mental instability. "Real poetic," Silas grunted. "That's rich. coming from a man who tried to drown his own kid. May poured the tea, her hands steady. We need help. Someone who knows animals. Someone who knows how trauma shows up when it can't be spoken. An hour later, Dr. Ian Maddox pulled into the drive in a dusty blue Suburban, a weathered vet bag slung over one shoulder. His beard had gone more silver than black over the years, but his eyes hadn't dulled a bit. Juniper met him at the porch, standing still but alert. "Well, hello there," Ian said, stopping a few feet away. "Aren't you something?" "She dragged the girl out of the river," Silas told him. "No saddle, no bridle, just knew." Ian narrowed his eyes. "That's not instinct, that's memory." He approached slowly, letting Juniper sniff his hand. Then, gently, he pressed his palm against her ribs, feeling for something deeper. "She's been handled," he said softly. "Trained, maybe even kept for a while, then dumped or escaped. This isn't just a wild horse." May leaned against the porch railing. "Harper trusts her more than she trusts us. Maybe she remembers things Juniper does." That afternoon, Silas showed May and Ian the old shed behind the cabin, where Juniper had been pawing at the floorboard since the day they arrived. Inside, they found a plastic storage tub covered in dust. Toys, old drawings, a stuffed fox missing one eye, and something else. A crumpled sheet of paper, water-stained but still legible. May unfolded it carefully. A child's drawing in crayon, a car, a curved road, a pair of wide blue eyes in the back seat, and a shadowy figure standing behind the wheel, arms reaching toward something beneath the car. A brake line. "Oh my God," May whispered. "She saw it, the accident. It wasn't an accident." Ian knelt beside the drawing, his expression unreadable. "She doesn't remember with words. She remembers with pictures." Juniper nudged Harper toward them, as if telling her it was safe now. The girl stood quietly beside May and looked down at the drawing. For a moment, no one moved. Then Harper reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a faded photo of a woman with gentle eyes, and a tiny slip of folded paper. May took it carefully, unfolding it with a reverence usually reserved for relics. The note read, "Don't trust anyone from the house. If anything happens to me, find the place with the butterflies." Harper looked up at May and whispered, barely audible, "I remember. Mama said the butterflies always lead to home." Silas swallowed hard. That woman didn't just vanish. She was warning the kid in case she didn't make it back. Later that evening, while Juniper grazed just outside and the fire popped softly in the hearth, May checked Harper's temperature and tucked the girl into a warm quilt. "She needs more than protection," May said. "She needs answers." Silas nodded slowly, then turned toward the window, eyes scanning the darkened woods. "We'll find them," he said, "whatever it takes." Outside, Juniper lifted her head, ears flicking at the faint sound of tires on gravel. From a ridge half a mile away, headlights blinked once, then disappeared into the trees. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and old wood, with a silence so dense it seemed to press against the walls. Harper sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping through an old sketchbook. Her drawings were simple but vivid. Stick-figure girls with red hair, horses with oversized eyes, butterflies floating above shadowed houses. May crouched beside her, watching quietly as the pages turned. Then one sketch made her pause. It was a cabin. Not this one, but another, tucked beneath the trees with wildflowers surrounding the porch. Above it, Harper had scrawled in bright blue crayon, "Mama's safe place." May met Silas's eyes across the room. "You recognize it?" Silas frowned. Might be that old trapper's shelter on the far ridge. Used to be Evelyn's favorite hiking spot before she disappeared. Locals say it's been empty for years. Harper pointed at the corner of the drawing. Tiny blue wings danced above the chimney. Blue butterflies, May whispered. Harper nodded. That's where she is. I think that's where Mama went. Juniper pawed the floor behind them, restless. Her ears twitched, and she tossed her head toward the window. She wants us to go, Harper said, her voice steady now. She knows the way. They packed light, blankets, medical supplies, and a flask of coffee. Silas brought his old hunting knife, just in case. May tucked Harper into a thick jacket and scarf, wrapping her legs in a wool blanket and placing her gently into a makeshift saddle rig strapped to Juniper's back. The horse didn't flinch, only turned her head as if to check Harper's balance before stepping forward. The woods thickened as they climbed, branches bare but claw-like, ice crackling underfoot. Juniper led them with uncanny precision, weaving through terrain that seemed untouched for years. May marveled at how she avoided the hidden holes, the broken branches, even a half-frozen fox carcass tangled in brambles. They reached the ridge just as dusk bled into the trees. The cabin stood like a ghost from memory, shingled roof mossy, door hanging slightly crooked, but the blue butterflies painted above the lintel were still visible, faded but unmistakable. Harper exhaled softly. This is it. Juniper whinnied low and stopped at the front steps. Silas pried open the door with a grunt. Dust swirled in the fading light. Inside, everything was quiet. Abandoned, yes, but not untouched. The furniture was sparse. A cot, a table, an old trunk. May checked the walls, then crouched to inspect the floorboards. This place wasn't left in a hurry, she muttered. It was meant to hide something. Harper pointed toward the trunk. Mama's box? They opened it slowly. Inside, a bundle of notebooks, several flash drives in labeled envelopes, and one manila folder labeled Whitlock Holdings, Forged Deeds, Altered Trusts, Threat Records. May's breath caught. She was building a case. Silas opened one of the notebooks. Evelyn's handwriting flowed in tight lines, notes on property transfers, meetings Graham had attended without her knowledge, names of attorneys now mysteriously retired or missing. She knew what he was doing, Silas said, and she vanished herself to protect Harper's inheritance, or to stay alive, May added. Suddenly, Juniper stomped hard on the porch, then again. Silas grabbed his knife and stepped outside. The forest had gone too quiet. No birds, no rustle. A shadow moved through the trees. Back inside, Silas barked. May shut the trunk and locked the door behind him. She ushered Harper into the corner and pulled the rifle from the fireplace mantel, a relic she had insisted they bring just in case. A soft clicking noise echoed from outside. A lighter? A camera? Then glass shattered. A Molotov cocktail burst against the porch, flames licking up the doorway. "Fire!" May shouted. "Silas, the back window!" Smoke rolled through the cabin in black curls. Silas smashed the back pane with a chair and pushed Harper out first. May tossed the trunk after her, coughing hard. Juniper circled the cabin, stamping and snorting, wild-eyed. "Harper," May called. "Call her." The girl cupped her hands around her mouth. "Juniper, come." The horse didn't hesitate. She barreled through the side of the cabin, breaking through the smoke-filled hallway, ducked her head low, and galloped toward the window. "Move," Silas yelled, grabbing Harper as Juniper launched through the frame in a thunder of hooves and fire. They didn't stop running until the cabin behind them was a smoldering glow in the trees. They made it back to the main cabin just after midnight. Harper had a shallow scrape on her cheek. May's lungs burned from the smoke. and Silas's knuckles were bloodied from breaking the window. But they were alive, and they had the trunk. Juniper, sides heaving, stood beside the porch, head high and ears rotating constantly, alert for any sign of return. May poured whiskey into tin mugs with shaking hands. Someone followed us. Someone wanted that evidence gone. But they didn't get it, Silas said. And now we've got more than suspicion, we've got proof. Harper sat wrapped in a quilt, clutching the flash drives. Her eyes gleamed with something sharper than fear, something close to resolve. She looked at May and said quietly, "Mama said to keep going when you see the butterflies." May smiled through the smoke and ash. "Then we keep going, baby girl." Outside, a soft fluttering passed over the trees. Blue butterflies, real or imagined, drifting through moonlight. And Juniper, silent and watchful, stood guard through the night. The annual spring festival in Aspen Hollow always brought a crowd. The town square transformed overnight. Food stalls lined the sidewalks, kids ran between hay bales, and blue ribbons fluttered from every tree like confetti. On the courthouse steps, local officials posed for photos, and music from a brass band spilled across the cobblestones. But this year, the joy felt forced. A tension rippled beneath the surface, unspoken but shared. Graham Whitlock stood near the auction stage in a tailored gray suit, shaking hands and flashing that politician's smile. He looked every bit the grieving father trying to stay strong. Behind him, a banner read, "Whitlock Charitable Fundraiser for Missing Children." The irony wasn't lost on the few who knew the truth. At the edge of the square, May, Silas, and Ian waited in the shadow of a coffee stand. Harper sat beside them in a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses, disguised well enough to pass for any other child enjoying the fair. Juniper waited behind a parked trailer, calm but alert, as if sensing her moment would come. Ian checked his phone for the 5th time. The projection system's wired. Audio's synced. We just need Harper's signal. Harper clutched a tiny remote in her lap. On it, one red button. Her thumb hovered. "She's ready," May said. The plan had taken weeks, gathering Evelyn's files, verifying recordings, preparing the evidence. But the most dangerous part wasn't collecting the truth, it was exposing it. In public, on Graham's turf. Silas adjusted the brim of his hat and said, "Soon as the auction starts, we move." At the podium, Graham tapped the mic. "Folks, thank you for being here. It's been a painful year, but Aspen Hollow always shows up. Today's auction is about hope, community, and, most of all, resilience." The crowd applauded politely. He gestured to the stagehand. "Let's bring out the next auction item, generously donated by Dr. Ian Maddox, a rare Highland Mustang mare, trained and beautiful." Juniper stepped forward, led by Ian. She didn't resist, didn't flinch under the crowd's gaze. Her chestnut coat gleamed in the sunlight, her eyes steady, unblinking. Graham smiled for the cameras, but his fingers twitched. He recognized the horse. Ian clipped the microphone to his coat and cleared his throat. "This mare has something to say, or, rather, someone else does." Harper pressed the red button. Every screen around the square lit up. The sound crackled at first. Then a voice filled the air, unmistakably Graham's. "You think I care what happens to that kid? She's a liability. If Evelyn had stayed out of my way, she wouldn't have vanished. And Harper, she was never supposed to come back." Gasps erupted. Some people dropped their drinks. A few mothers pulled their children closer. The screen changed to show Harper's drawings, then Evelyn's journal entries, photographs of forged signatures, scanned deeds, even the medical report from Harper's first accident. Graham staggered back. "This is fake, all of it. Silas stepped forward. Then explain why you were seen outside the cabin 2 nights ago. Why you hired someone to torch it. Graham turned to run. He didn't get far. Juniper let out a piercing cry and charged. Not to attack, but to block. She galloped straight across the grass, cutting Graham off with surgical precision. He stumbled back, falling hard on the pavement. His hair was tousled now, the mask cracked. Sheriff Ruth Delaney stepped from the crowd, her badge gleaming. "Graham Whitlock," she said loud enough for the microphones to catch, "you are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice." She snapped the cuffs on as Graham flailed. "You can't do this. I built this town." "No," Ruth said. "You poisoned it." The crowd parted as Ruth led him away. Some people clapped. Others stood in stunned silence. But Harper didn't move. She sat beneath the auction stage, her sunglasses pushed up, eyes locked on her father. Her voice, quiet but clear, cut through the murmurs. "I remember. You pushed me." Graham's head whipped around. He looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. Harper stared back, her chin high. Juniper stepped beside her, shielding her body with her own. And that was how Aspen Hollow saw it end. Not with a trial in some far-off city, but right there in the town square, with a girl, a horse, and the truth finally spoken aloud. That night the square was quiet again. Harper lay curled up on May's couch, her stuffed fox in one arm, Juniper's breathing audible just outside the window. May sat beside her with a mug of tea. "Do you feel different?" May asked softly. Harper nodded. "Lighter." Silas knocked once before stepping in. He carried a box, the last of Evelyn's files, and set it gently on the table. "We've got a lot to sort through," he said, "but the hard part's over." Harper smiled faintly. "Not over, just finally real." May brushed a strand of hair from the girl's face. "You were so brave today." "I wasn't alone," Harper replied. Her voice was sure now. Juniper remembered too. Outside, under the first stars of spring, the mare stood still, head high and eyes fixed on the horizon, as if waiting for the next path to reveal itself. Spring melted into early summer, and the air in Aspen Hollow changed. The town no longer whispered in fear of the Whitlock name. Graham's arrest had made headlines across Colorado: real estate fraud, attempted murder, falsifying court documents. His face, once framed by campaign posters and charity galas, now appeared in mugshots and courtroom sketches. But for Harper, the real shift was quieter, slower, like the unfurling of a leaf in sunlight. The cabin on the ridge, once a ruin smothered in ash and memory, had been rebuilt by hand. Not with money, but with care. Silas, May, and Ian had called in help from the townspeople, most of whom showed up with hammers, lumber, and casseroles. They weren't just helping rebuild a home. They were righting something that had weighed heavy on the town's conscience for too long. Above the front door hung a new wooden sign, hand-carved and painted a deep sky blue, the House of Blue Butterflies. Harper had chosen the name herself. The cabin became a sanctuary, not just for her, but for others. May started taking in foster children who'd suffered trauma. Ian ran animal therapy sessions in the field out back. Juniper, now officially certified as a therapy horse, served as both guardian and guide, greeting each new child with the same gentle nudge she'd once given Harper. And then, one quiet afternoon in July, Evelyn returned. She arrived at the edge of the trail like a shadow turned real. Thinner than Harper remembered, hair streaked with gray, but her eyes were the same, warm, fierce, and full of pain and love. She stepped into the clearing without a word, as if she'd never left. Harper stood on the porch, barefoot in the sunlight, frozen. Juniper lifted her head, ears flicking. "Mama?" Harper whispered. Evelyn dropped to her knees. "I'm here, baby." Harper ran to her, and they folded into each other like two pieces of the same broken thing, finally made whole. Evelyn rocked her, tears soaking Harper's hair, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to leave you. I had to stay gone until I had enough to stop him, for good." Harper didn't answer right away. She just clung to her mother's shirt. "You left blue butterflies," she said finally. "That's how I knew." They sat together beneath the cottonwoods for what felt like hours. No one rushed, no one intruded. Juniper stood just behind them, as if guarding a memory. Inside the cabin that evening, Evelyn told them everything. She'd faked her death with the help of a friend in Denver, gone underground, and tracked Graham's dealings across 4 states. She'd left clues for Harper, notes hidden in books, in toys, even tucked inside the locket she wore. She had watched from afar as May and Silas protected her daughter, waiting for the right moment to come home. "I saw the video of the fair," Evelyn said, her voice cracking. "I saw her stand up to him. She's stronger than I ever was." "She's strong because you are," May said. That night, Evelyn slept on the old cot beside Harper's bed. Juniper lay just outside the window. The moon cast a pale glow across the blankets, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and fresh-cut wood. Harper woke briefly, turned toward her mother and whispered, "We're safe now." And for once, it was true. The weeks that followed were full of color. Children came and went from the house, each with their own hurt, their own quiet. Harper made friends slowly, kids with scars hidden behind silence or sideways glances. But they came alive around the animals. They brushed ponies, planted vegetables, painted murals across the back wall of the barn. One day, they covered an entire fence with blue butterflies, each wing painted by a different hand. Harper rode Juniper through the fields now, no longer with fear, but with joy. She'd never regained full use of her legs, but she no longer saw herself as broken. On horseback, she was fast, graceful, and free. One afternoon, a sculptor from town arrived with a bronze statue he'd spent months working on. Juniper mid-leap, mane flying, with a small child clinging to her back. They placed it in the garden, surrounded by wildflowers. On the base, a simple inscription, "To the one who jumped in." On a warm August morning, Evelyn stood at the fence line with May and Silas. They watched the children playing tag while Juniper trotted lazily through the tall grass. "I never thought I'd live to see this," Evelyn said softly. "You gave us the pieces," May replied. "We just helped put them back together." Harper came galloping toward them, laughter rising with the wind. She slid off Juniper's back and ran, on braced legs and stubborn balance, straight into her mother's arms. "Can we go to the trail?" she asked breathlessly. "Where the butterflies are." They made the short hike to the clearing where Evelyn had once painted the first blue wings. The flowers were blooming now, taller than Harper's waist. Dozens of butterflies flitted through the air, catching the sun like bits of stained glass. Harper turned to Juniper, now resting beside a tree, and whispered, "You knew all along, didn't you?" The mare blinked slowly, lowering her head. Harper pressed her forehead to Juniper's cheek. "You're more than just a horse, you're a miracle." A breeze swept through the clearing, lifting petals into the sky. "I'm going to help other kids," Harper said aloud. "Just like you helped me." Evelyn squeezed her shoulder. "You already are." As the sun dipped low, the 3 of them, Mother, daughter, and horse stood surrounded by blue butterflies. Somewhere far away, a bell rang from the ranch house, signaling dinner. But Harper didn't move yet. She turned to Juniper and whispered one last thing, just for her. "You didn't save me because I was strong. I'm strong because you saved me." Juniper lifted her head to the wind, and the butterflies swirled around them like a quiet answer. And in Aspen Hollow, the darkness finally lifted.